The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 7. A 57-year-old woman was riding a boat in Florida when an eagle ray suddenly leaped out of the water. The 75-pound ray smacked her directly in the head and she died almost immediately of a shattered skull. Attila the Hun was one of the most feared rulers throughout Europe during his reign, known for his brutal pillaging of Roman cities during the 5th century. But on his wedding night, he got drunk, fell asleep in his bed, and died of a nosebleed. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a hickey. The suction created a blood clot that traveled to his brain, eventually causing a stroke. A Texas man was warned by bystanders to not go swimming in a harbor that was filled with alligators. But he shouted his last words, "F them alligators," before jumping in and being torn to shreds. Morbid Facts, Part 141. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. Researchers would later discover that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Unlike male bodies, female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose. The only reason this was done was to prevent the embalmers from getting weird with the bodies. Children who are victims of hot car deaths are often found with large portions of their hair ripped out. The only reason dogs love squeaky toys is because they sound like little animals dying. Every unborn baby grows a mustache in the womb, which then spreads to cover the entire body. The baby then eats this fine hair called lanugo, then excretes it after birth with their first bowel movement. Morbid Facts, Part 143. In 2012, a Jesus statue in India had water mysteriously dripping from its toes. Worshippers flocked from all over to collect and sometimes drink this miracle water. But soon enough, the source of the water was found to be a clogged toilet near the statue. After the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Chinese government sent bills to the families of the protesters for the cost of the bullets used to kill their loved ones. Over the last 10 years, about 10 Americans have been accidentally shot by dogs. 5 of them happened in Florida. Jeremy Rodale was a longevity expert who popularized the term organic food. While filming an interview for the Dick Cavett Show, he declared, "I've decided to live to be 100 and I've never felt better in my life." But minutes later, Rodale died of a heart attack while still being filmed. Morbid Facts, Part 144. In 1978, 15-year-old Mary Vincent was hitchhiking in California when she was picked up by 56-year-old Larry Singleton. The man eventually knocked her out with a sledgehammer and sexually assaulted her that night. The next day, he cut off both her arms with a hatchet and threw her into a ditch to die. But Mary managed to pack her stumps with blood to stop the bleeding and spent all night crawling out. She eventually made it to the highway and started walking, naked and covered in blood. The first car that saw her sped away in horror. The second car was a couple on their honeymoon who picked her up and she survived. Singleton was sentenced to 14 years in prison but was released 6 years early due to good behavior. He would go on to murder a different woman named Roxanne Hayes a few years later. Morbid Facts, Part 145. In 1903, Topsy the elephant was executed by poisoning, strangulation, and electrocution. A 74-second video of the electrocution was recorded and preserved by Thomas Edison. It may have been the first time ever that death was captured in a motion picture film. In 1854, a 13-year-old boy died in San Francisco after a circus clown swung him around by the heels. A Frenchman named Tarare was famous in the 1700s for his endless appetite. He was reported to have eaten live snakes, cats, lizards, and puppies. In one case, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting. While being treated in a hospital for his condition, he was caught trying to drink other patients' blood and eat corpses from the morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 8. A South African man adopted a baby hippo after rescuing it from a river. 5 years later, the hippo dragged him into that same river and mauled him to death. Last January, a Kansas man died after being shot by his dog in a freak hunting accident. He was sitting in the front seat of his pickup truck when his dog stepped on his rifle in the back seat. In 2011, a 49-year-old Russian woman had a heart attack and was presumed dead. A few days later, she woke up at her own wake and was so shocked that she screamed and had another heart attack, this time dying for real. In 1991, a woman from Thailand accidentally slipped in mud, grabbed a live wire, and was electrocuted to death. Later that day, when her sister was showing the neighbors how the accident happened, she slipped, grabbed the same live wire, and was electrocuted to death. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 9. In 2013, a young Japanese man began slithering on his parents' floor and acting erratically, claiming he had become a snake. His father then spent the next 2 days violently headbutting and biting him to, quote, drive out the snake that had possessed him. The man eventually died from blunt force trauma. In 2017, Minnesota woman Mona Lisa Perez killed her boyfriend by shooting him in the chest through an encyclopedia at point-blank range. Apparently, they were trying to make a viral YouTube video and didn't expect the bullet to penetrate the book. Just last month, an AI chatbot convinced a Belgian man to take his own life. Concerned about climate change, he apparently mentioned the idea of sacrificing himself so that the AI bot could save the Earth. Instead of dissuading him, the bot encouraged him to act on his dark thoughts so they could, quote, live together as one person in paradise. Morbid Facts, Part 147. In 1991, Patricia Stallings was sentenced to life in prison for poisoning her child with antifreeze. She then gave birth to a second child while in prison, who was given to a foster care. But he eventually became sick with the same symptoms as the first child, indicating a rare metabolic disorder, not poisoning. This proved her innocence and she was later released. In a Mexican prison in 2020, two rival drug cartels decided to have a friendly soccer match. Things must have gotten out of hand pretty quickly since the match ended with 16 people dead. In 1975, it was revealed that the CIA had developed a heart attack gun that fired a dart of frozen water and shellfish toxin. Once inside the body, it would melt, leaving only a small red mark on the victim. The official cause of death would always be a heart attack. Morbid Facts, Part 149. While getting into character for the Jobs movie, Ashton Kutcher tried Steve Jobs' diet, but he ended up in a hospital because it messed with his pancreas levels. It's likely no coincidence that Steve Jobs died from pancreatic cancer. Albert Einstein's last words were lost forever because he said them in German, which the nurse attending to him did not speak. The disclaimer of no animals were harmed during the making of this film isn't always true. It can be put on movies even if animals died during the production, as long as cameras weren't rolling at the time. The Heart Attack Grill is a restaurant in Las Vegas where people weighing over 350 pounds can eat for free. 3 people have died while eating there, and the only vegan option on the menu is cigarettes. Morbid Facts, Part 150. In her Firefox search history, Casey Anthony had foolproof suffocation methods from the day before her daughter died. But police overlooked this evidence because they only checked her search history from Internet Explorer. Throughout his life, Ernest Hemingway survived malaria, anthrax, pneumonia, dysentery, skin cancer, diabetes, hepatitis, a ruptured kidney, spleen, and liver, a crushed vertebrae, and a fractured skull. He also survived 2 separate plane crashes in a 2-day span while on an African safari. In 2013, a French businessman died of a heart attack while having an affair with a stranger during a company trip. A French court ruled that this was an industrial accident and that his wife and family were entitled to compensation. Morbid Facts, Part 151. The death of Metallica singer James Hetfield's mom inspired him to write the song The God That Failed. She died when he was 16 due to Christian beliefs influencing her to reject cancer treatment. In 1999, a waitress was tipped a lottery ticket and won $10 million. She was then sued by her colleagues for their share. Afterwards, she was sued by the man who tipped her the ticket. Then she was kidnapped by her ex-husband and ended up shooting him in the chest. Lastly, she went to court against the IRS for more than a decade before finally winning. In 1825, painter Samuel Morse received a letter which read that his wife was sick. The next day, he received a new letter which read that she had died. 2 days later, he went to see his wife one last time only to discover she had already been buried. Distraught over the slowness of long-distance communication, he invented the Morse code. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 4. In 1880, the Queen of Thailand's boat capsized on the way to her palace. But despite many witnesses, nobody dared to save the drowning queen and her daughter. This was because touching the queen under any circumstances was a crime punishable by death. Bobby Leach was a world-renowned daredevil who became the second person to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. A few years later, he died from a vicious infection after slipping on an orange peel. In 1996, a man named Michael Paul was on his way home from church when he decided to crack his neck just like any other time. But a few minutes afterwards, he suddenly started sweating profusely and then went pale. By the time Michael was brought to a hospital, he had already slipped into a coma and died after 12 days of being on life support. An autopsy later revealed that the neck crack must have damaged one of the main arteries to his brain and resulted in a fatal stroke. Morbid Facts, Part 60. A man was looking for his childhood home on Google Maps when he found both of his dead parents still sitting outside. As the Titanic sank, one female passenger chose to stay on board because she refused to leave her dog. She was found dead in the water, holding her dog in her arms. If sugar gliders are deprived of social interaction, they can become so sad that they can die from loneliness. In 2007, a man from Florida woke up in the middle of the night with a severe headache. When he drove to the hospital, they found a bullet in his head. It turned out that his wife had shot him in the head while he was sleeping. Morbid Facts, Part 61. JFK's little sister Rosemary was born mentally ill, and the Kennedy family didn't want to be embarrassed by her. So they paid a surgeon to perform a lobotomy on her when she turned 23. During a lobotomy, the surgeon would shove a metal rod into the skull through the eye socket and scramble the frontal lobe. Rosemary was awake the whole time, and doctors asked her questions while they were cutting away at her brain. When she suddenly stopped verbally responding, they ended the surgery. Following the operation, Rosemary Kennedy was never able to walk or talk again. She was institutionalized for the rest of her life until she died at the age of 86. Morbid Facts, Part 62. In 2008, a 23-year-old Vietnamese woman suffered from a mysterious food allergy that aged her about 50 years in just a few days. Recognize any of the objects in this photo? This picture is designed to give the viewer the simulated experience of having a stroke. Everything looks hauntingly familiar, but you can't quite fully recognize a single object. In 1939, 5-year-old Lena Medina became the youngest confirmed person to ever give birth. Her son was born by C-section and was raised as her brother. Medina is still alive today, but has never revealed the identity of the father nor the circumstances of her impregnation. Morbid Facts, Part 63. Russian scientist Vladimir Demikhov is widely considered to be a pioneer in the world of organ transplants. He is also more notoriously known for his attempts to create a two-headed dog during the Cold War era. He created about 20 of these dogs, which had the ability to move around, drink water, and even bark. Most died within days, but one specimen was able to live for more than a month. Experts have considered his work horrifying but incredible. These were the clothing and acts of Rome's most famous executioner, Mastro Tita. He carried out a total of 516 executions over a 68-year span. In 2015, 17-year-old Rebecca Townsend completed her bucket list right before she was hit by a car. Her final goal was to save a life. Before the car hit her, she pushed her friend out of the way and sacrificed herself. Morbid Facts, Part 65. This is why you should never put your feet on a car's dashboard. 22-year-old Grain Healy had her legs propped up when the airbag went off and forced both of her feet into her skull, breaking almost every bone in her face. As a result of her injuries, part of her skull was removed and she lived without a forehead for 2 years. Celestis Incorporated is a company that will send your cremated remains into space. For a price ranging from $1,000 to $15,000, you have the option of being launched into deep space, to the moon, or into Earth's orbit. In the 9th century, the corpse of a pope was put on trial and found guilty. His 7-month-old skeleton had 3 fingers removed and was thrown into a river with weights tied to it. Morbid Facts, Part 66. In 2008, Charles Peck was killed instantly in a commuter train crash in California. But somehow 35 phone calls were made to his friends and family from Charles's phone in the 12 hours before his body was recovered. When answered, all people could hear was static on the line. Everyone thought he was just lost in the wreckage until his mutilated body was found. In 1955, a pregnant woman was scheduled for a C-section in Morocco, but she fled the hospital after watching another woman die during the procedure. She was in pain for a few days afterwards, but when the pain suddenly disappeared, she simply went on with her life. 46 years later, she was diagnosed with a tumor. It turned out to be the calcified baby still inside of her. Morbid Facts, Part 67. In the year 1916, a town in Tennessee hanged an elephant. Mary the Asian elephant was once the star of the show at the Sparks world-famous circus. But one day, she was working with a trainer who was clearly not qualified for the job. During a parade, the man hit her with a spear and abused her excessively. In pain, she suddenly ran at him and stomped on his head, killing him instantly. Local residents began crying for blood, so the circus owner agreed to kill Mary in retribution. On the evening of September 12, 1916, murderous Mary was hanged from a crane in front of a crowd of cheering people. Morbid Facts, Part 68. This is the grave of Jesse Presley, Elvis Presley's twin brother who was stillborn. Elvis would often open up to friends and family about his unborn brother, telling them that he always had a persistent feeling that Jesse was somehow with him throughout his life. In the 1800s, you could pay your admission to the London Zoo by bringing in a pet cat or dog to feed the lions. This is a photo of an Australian model being distracted by the first plane that hit the World Trade Center on 9/11. She and many others thought the blast was just an accident until the second plane hit. In 2015, a dying fisherman told his two buddies to use his ashes as bait mix. 3 weeks after he died, his friends used his ashes to reel in this 180-pound monster carp. It was one of the largest carps ever caught. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 5. In 2008, a Brazilian priest strapped 1,000 balloons onto a lawn chair and rode it into the sky as part of a fundraiser. He was able to reach an altitude of around 20,000 feet before losing contact with authorities. Over a month later, the lower half of his body was found floating near an oil rig. British entrepreneur Jimmy Heselden became the CEO of Segway Inc. after purchasing the company in 2009. The next year, he died from blunt force trauma after falling off a cliff on a Segway. Every year, about 150 people are killed by falling coconuts across the globe. Famous whiskey distiller Jack Daniel died after kicking his safe in frustration because he forgot his combination. He injured his big toe and it got infected, so he had to have his entire foot amputated. But the infection spread to the rest of his body and he died from blood poisoning. Morbid Facts, Part 163. This is why saturation diving is one of the highest paying jobs in the world. In 1983, 4 rig workers were working deep in a diving chamber in the North Sea. When one of the men opened a hatch too early, the chamber quickly depressurized and dropped from 9 atmospheres of pressure to 1 in less than a second. All 4 men were killed instantly as the pressure was so explosive that it caused 3 of the divers' blood to flash boil. The 4th diver wasn't any luckier as he was forced through a small opening and violently torn apart. According to the autopsy, all of the organs of his chest were launched out of his body and projected upwards more than 30 feet. All of the men likely died immediately, but the investigators were never the same after discovering such a gruesome scene. Morbid Facts, Part 166. Despite growing up deaf and blind, Helen Keller was a supporter of eugenics. She believed that infants who were born with severe mental or physical disabilities were better off dying. Tobacco companies spend the most money on advertising during the month of January. This is because January is when most people are trying to quit as New Year's resolutions. This is a photo of an Iraqi officer with a fearless expression on his face just moments before being beheaded by an ISIS militant. Male otters have been known to violently rape female otters, baby seals, and other sea creatures. Sadly, this often results in death for the victims since the male otter will sometimes bite and drown them to get his way. Morbid Facts, Part 167. Mike Tyson got into his first fight after a bully ripped the head off of one of his pigeons. He said that the pigeon was the first thing that he ever loved and inspired him to become a fighter. There are more Panda Express locations in the world than actual pandas. When people die from Alzheimer's, it's usually because the disease got so bad that they forgot how to swallow or breathe. There's a blue whale who sings at such a high frequency that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Nicknamed 52 Blue, his calls have been heard every year since the 1980s but never receive a response. He's been called the world's loneliest whale. Morbid Facts, Part 169. After being convicted for the murder of Deborah Reese in 1993, Liddell Lee maintained his innocence for 24 years. Before his execution in 2017, his last words were, "I am an innocent man." Just a few days ago, a different man's DNA was found on the murder weapon. Female ducks are raped so frequently that many species have developed a second decoy vagina through evolution. They can offer it to intruders that they don't want to be impregnated by. Only 1 out of every 1,000 sea turtles born actually make it to adulthood. Fatal familial insomnia is a rare incurable brain disease that progressively destroys your brain's ability to sleep. Eventually, you stop sleeping altogether, go completely insane, suffer from seizures, and die from cardiac arrest. Morbid Facts, Part 171. In 2003, a woman from Texas hit a homeless man with her car and his body became lodged in her windshield. She drove home with him still stuck in the car and repeatedly apologized to the man when he was in her garage. But she never called for help and the man died 2 days later as the woman received 50 years in prison. Dodo birds were very friendly and curious animals since they had no natural predators. And then we came along and killed them all. For animal testing involving dogs, most laboratories use beagles because they're the most forgiving of humans inflicting pain on them. In the 1920s, the federal government poisoned alcohol in an effort to curb consumption during Prohibition. As a result, more than 10,000 Americans died from poisoning by their own government. Morbid Facts, Part 173. Lama Itigilov was a Buddhist said to have reached nirvana, the final goal of Buddhism. This is due to the lifelike state of his corpse, which is not subject to macroscopic decay even though he was never embalmed. He died in 1927, and upon the latest examination in 2005, scientists stated his body was in the condition of someone who had died just 36 hours ago. In 2009, an Indian doctor removed 172,000 kidney stones from a single kidney. Both the patient and surgeon now hold Guinness World Records that will hopefully never be broken. In 1961, Soviet doctor Leonid Rogozov was working in Antarctica when he realized he had appendicitis. He knew he would die if his appendix wasn't removed, but he was the only doctor on the expedition. So he ended up performing the surgery on himself and miraculously recovered. Morbid Facts, Part 164. Kim Jong-un travels with his own toilet to prevent his excretions from falling into the wrong hands. The waste contains important information about his health status and can't be left behind. In the 1960s, the CIA spent $20 million on a cat equipped with gear to spy on the Soviets. Sadly, the operation was canceled when the cat was hit and killed by a taxi almost immediately. A 115-year-old woman from Nepal has been smoking at least 1 pack of cigarettes per day since 1920. She claims that smoking has aided in her longevity and that all the doctors who advised her to quit have already died. Morbid Facts, Part 175. Described by the media as the world's worst serial killer, Luis Garavito is responsible for the rape and murder of over 100 young boys. After a total of only 22 years served, he will be released from Colombian prison this year. After teenager Amy Billig disappeared in 1974, her mother began receiving phone calls from a man claiming Amy was serving as his slave. The chilling calls continued for more than 20 years, but the case was never solved. In 1933, a doctor named Carl Tanzler raided the grave of a female patient with whom he'd become obsessed before she died. He stole her body from the tomb and lived with her corpse for 7 years. As her body fell apart, he attached the bones together using coat hangers and fitted her face with glass eyes. He was only caught when someone saw him dancing with the corpse in front of an open window. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 6. George Washington died when his doctors were trying to cure his sore throat. They were using a process called bloodletting, which involved draining a patient's blood until their illness was cured. He lost nearly half his blood before they stopped the treatment, and he died a few hours afterwards. 26-year-old Mark Leeson suffocated in his sleep after shoving 2 tampons up his nose before going to bed. Apparently, he was just trying to find a solution for his snoring problem. It's estimated that throughout the world, about 25 people are killed by champagne corks every year. A British student was once taking an exam and couldn't handle the stress and anxiety anymore. So he put 2 pencils up his nostrils and headbutted the desk, forcing the pencils through his brain. He died instantly and all the other students got automatic A's.